right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Clemens with a Z podcast. New name. This is the first episode. Um, the We Were in a Cult series under the new name. So this is fun. I've got former member of the International Church of Christ, Kristin, here with me. Kristin, say hi.
Hello.
Yeah, and like you all know, we're just trying to have a conversation about this wild freaking life we had in this church. So let's get this going. So, Kristen, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Shout out to Steph for calling you out and putting you on
I
here.
know.
Mhm. So, how did you get involved in this church? Were you a Kingdom kid? Were you met? What happened?
So I always don't know how to answer that question because some people say yes, I was, and some say no. We got invited by girl that I went to school with. I was at her birthday party or something in fourth grade, and they invited our parents out. So I've been a part of it from fourth grade, and then I left when I was 17. Um,
Well, we'll
so I kind of brought us into it, and I left.
we'll call you a pseudo Kingdom kid. How
Yeah,
about
there we go.
Um, so were you guys super religious before in your family? Did you talk about God? Do you remember
Yeah,
that early?
yeah, so my parents were Methodist, and so we would go to different churches because they were church shopping actually
Hmm.
when we met them. So I think it just kind of fell in line how my parents felt it was supposed to. And so they had been trying out different churches. So I do always remember going to some type of church.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't constant, but pretty frequently. Like my dad to this day still reads his Bible, and he's no longer a part of it, but he has always been very spiritual. I wouldn't say religious, but he's always been very spiritual. He has his faith and he stands firm in that. And I love that for him.
Hmm.
Um, to this day, he still, but I do remember always being at a church and then, obviously most of my memories are from the ICOC. So,
So do you remember like what do you think like if I would say God, like did you have a view of like what God was before you got to our church, or can you remember?
um, really they just focused on the cross and Jesus
Hmm.
dying for our sins. That was always what it was portrayed as.
Hmm.
So the cross study, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I
Hmm.
was so desensitized to it. That's what I've always known, and it always been discussed and told different ways and all of that. So it was kind of like a fairy tale to me, but that's just kind of what this man went and died for us and he was a martyr, whatever. Um, but the fear of you're wrong, that was not until we came here that I remember him being an angry God and he's always watching and you got to do what's right at all times and you can't mess up or you're going to be punished type.
Hmm.
Like the perfection of it, which really I really feel like that's a big part of what my personality was, is that I'm a people pleaser because I don't like messing up because I feel like, oh my gosh, I can't mess up. I'm supposed to do everything perfectly or right the first time, and which is
Hmm.
ridiculous. So I've had a hard time letting go of that even to this day of it's okay to mess up. I'm human.
Yeah. So you're saying that like this viewpoint of like the fear of God, God is
Hmm.
angry, that wasn't your original feeling of God. It was like after you started coming
No.
to the
Yeah.
ICOC. Hmm.
Yeah, it was more before, it was more like he did this for you because he loves you, not because he expects you to be perfect, or whatnot, but he did this for you out of love. And then here it was more like, yes, it was out of love, but it was also he made the sacrifice for you, so you're going to make a sacrifice for him and you're going to give your whole life over to being
Hmm.
perfect and doing no wrong. And that's what always stuck with me.
Hmm. Yeah, it was definitely
Not the
that.
loving God that they talk
No.
about.
People would probably argue that all the time that that's not what they were, but we really focused on that.
Oh
And they
yeah.
made sure if they made sure at a young age that that's what
Mhm.
you got, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
Mhm. I mean,
without a doubt.
I can remember feeling like the first time I remember like sinning and being like, all right, so this is it. This is when I'm going to
I'm going
hell.
to hell.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that just being with me forever. It's so funny that perfectionism comes up a lot with people.
Mhm.
Like, and I mean, it's a big thing for me too.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
because when you got older and more involved or continued to stay involved, it was everything you did wrong, you were rebuked. You had your
yeah.
discipler or your group or whatever, it was held against you. You couldn't move forward with studies, whatever, you were rebuked. And so it was like, I don't want to do that. And the last thing I wanted to do was disappoint my parents. Not that they ever made me feel different, but I am the middle child. I'm a typical middle child. My sisters are all incredible and brilliant and have always been amazing humans. And they're very smart. And so I always felt like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with that. So I can do stuff to please my parents. They want us involved in this church. I'll be involved in this church. And that was ridiculous. My parents have never made me feel like that. My parents are amazing. Um, they have never made me feel like I'm any less than my sisters. And so, because I have ADHD, I was actually finally diagnosed this year. But growing up, we didn't know really what ADD was or ADHD was. So, and my sisters have never struggled with that. So I was very much like the black sheep, but they never made me feel like that. I made
Mhm.
myself feel like that. But that perfection is where that came in too. And, you have these people telling you, you have to do this, you have to do this right. You can't mess up, or you're going to get yelled at. I don't enjoy that. I do not enjoy getting yelled at all, or made to feel like I'm less than I am. So, it made me very insecure and not confident in any decision making or, how it was going to affect others. I was always terrified of that because I never wanted to let my parents down ever, even though I was not a good job at listening and still am not to this day. I'm not a good
Mhm.
listener when I'm told to do something. But when it came to that aspect, because it was all consuming in our lives, I really felt like, okay, I need to be involved in that. I want to make my parents proud in this way. I can't do it with the schooling because I'm terrible at school, but
Mhm.
I can at least do this for them and be involved and make these decisions that I feel like they want, which is ridiculous because they would never want that for me. And they never, pushed the twins to do anything like that because they weren't as involved as me and my older sister were. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was ridiculous. That was all my own internal nonsense from feeling like that.
I wonder what switched that on,
Mhm.
because I mean, I think I can relate to you in with regards to how my parents were versus like with like I always felt like the journey was my own.
Mhm.
I did know that, I mean, I did know that like the church was life. So
Mhm. Oh, yes.
church was
7 days
life.
a week.
And so we were going to do it how they did it. But
Mhm.
I mean, I was never like thrown in closets for like not doing it right or like forced
Right.
to do things. But I guess
But
like
you
you're
felt
saying,
you had to.
yeah, I did
Yeah.
feel like I had to and I wanted to, like you're saying,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
you would see your parents when feeling you just I would see their reactions to like people getting baptized or their
Mhm.
kids getting
Yep.
baptized and wanting to give that for them.
Yep.
And it's just interesting how none of this came from them, but we just maybe it was because we were so young.
I think so. I really do because I mean those teachings on Sunday mornings and I mean
Mhm.
yes, obey your parents and they always preach that scripture, but it was perfection was expected. And so I
Mhm.
felt like I can't give perfection at school because I struggle to stay focused on anything and get through the day.
Mhm.
So I could do this because I love talking with people. I'm good with people. I enjoy the conversation. I can do that. I can sit here and
Yeah.
say, oh, yeah, I did this, I wasn't doing it, but they
Mhm.
didn't know that. So, which, led into a double life for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was wild and of no fault of their own either.
I know. Did your family ever do family devos?
I don't ever remember us doing that
Oh
at all.
God.
And I'm so like, We may have, and maybe I just put it out of my brain, but I don't ever remember doing those.
I
Maybe we
just,
did. I don't know. We'll have to ask my
yeah,
sisters because I have
you
no
got
idea.
to, because I have these vivid memories of like making cardboard armor of God with my brothers.
No.
Yeah, that's how just it was just so all encompassing of like what we did.
That's wild. No, I did not. I didn't know you had to be like that in detail on those family devos.
Oh yeah, my
That's
parents were all in. Like I mean, they were, I mean, for since the 70s, but I mean, it
right.
was like live or die by the church.
Wow.
So was it jarring? Because I mean, or do you might not even, since you were like, let's say fourth grade, so you're like 9 when you start the church. I mean, it had to have been a lot to go from like how church is everywhere else versus for us.
Yeah. But the way that it transitioned for us is, I don't know. I guess at that age, it was just like I didn't struggle making friends at school, but I didn't have the friendships that were being presented to me when we
Mhm.
started coming and
Yeah.
the events and stuff. So it was always like fun stuff or, oh yeah, we get together and we do this. Um, so my parents were not from Georgia, they're from Alabama.
Hmm.
And so they did have acquaintances and friends that way, but not really any type of like true good friend. Nobody that they
Yeah.
went and hung out with all the time, or at least that I remember. And so it was a family for them. They had not had, my mom was an only child growing up, and my dad had one brother, and he still is in Alabama. And so it was this community of people that were warm and welcoming, and you had your church. So you felt good about it.
Hmm.
Um, so that I think just coming into that, that was actually really nice because we were instantly like, hey, we've got all these friends. And as a kid, you get to go do all this stuff, and you're like, heck yeah, I don't want to be home. Like, let's go do that. So it wasn't really a shock for me. We had kind of embraced that. And I think that part of it was always nice until it became more.
Hmm.
It was you have to be here or you get in trouble or, you can't leave early. You can't get a job here or there. You had to get approved where you worked
Hmm.
and, tried to work, but around all this stuff. Um, so it wasn't really like a culture shock for me. I very much enjoyed that aspect of because I'm such a people person that I enjoyed the hangouts and doing stuff all the time until I didn't.
Yeah, it was
So it
so
became
cool.
more.
It was so cool for me in the beginning with
Hmm.
regards to people, and like we were in different ministries until we were in one ministry until middle school. But I was just exposed to all types of people. I just remember my
Yeah.
house feeling like it was a revolving door
Hmm.
of just people. I mean, it was people from all races and ages. I mean, I remember my
Yep.
parents met a family from Czechoslovakia, and
That's
I was
awesome.
I was like 7, and I'm like hanging out with these Czechoslovakian people. There's the girl was actually my first kiss ever. It was this Czechoslovakian girl.
That's so fun.
It was during a Bible talk at our house, and
You
I
naughty boy.
know I never could get it right.
How did you get away with that is what I want to know because there were eyes everywhere.
No, it was not in the beginning. It wasn't like that in the beginning. I don't remember feeling eyes. It wasn't until middle school or high school that I remember feeling that, because I mean it was
So
just
how old were you when that happened then
when
with the
what?
kiss? With the
I was like
kiss.
7. I was like 7 or 8, maybe. Hmm.
I was 16
You were 16. Wow.
on my 16th birthday.
Uh-huh.
That is
Yeah.
so funny. Okay, so I didn't realize 7. Okay. I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah, it was,
yeah.
I think it was either in, I can't remember it. I think it was in a laundry, it was in a laundry room. Um, but yeah, nobody, I don't know if my parents knew or not, but yeah, this girl, Eva. Hmm.
That's so awesome.
Huh? Yeah. I mean,
You
it was
are
still,
naughty. Look at
well,
you
I
in there
mean, not
spinning in the
really,
laundry
because
room.
it took me, it took me what, 20 more years to do anything else, because,
Well, did you count to 3?
yeah. So yeah, so you're getting it, it's fun. You have a group of friends,
Yeah,
everything's
how they
great.
suck you in.
hmm when did it start to get weird? Or before that, like I haven't got to talk to a lot of people about this, but like when I think about church, the one thing that's positive is camp.
Oh, I loved camp.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I loved the swamp. I loved it. Um, Sunny and Carolyn were absolutely phenomenal. Love to them. I
hmm
still have so much respect for them to this
hmm
day. Um, they let us be kids, but also gave us, I feel like, the guidance that we needed. I felt like camp was just a break from the, I know it still had its rules, but it was just like a break from the everyday
hmm
eyes on you, every little thing that you do. When there was a big group of people, it wasn't as much like that, I feel. And we
hmm
were having more fun. And that was our way to be able to open up some and make those friendships. So
hmm
I loved camp. I have such great memories of camp. I don't know how my parents afforded to do all this because we never went without with anything and they would never discuss finances. We were always told that's none of your business. So I
Oh
don't know
wow.
how they did it with four girls within 5 years of each other because all four of us are within five. Marissa was five when the twins were born. So my
hmm
parents had three of us in diapers at once. They're saints.
That's crazy. Yeah, camp was always the bright spot for me. It
It
was the
was.
faith. It was for everything that was going on ever in the world and
Hmm.
whatever I was feeling, that was the safe place. Um,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Which actually surprised. So I think I had already been gone by the time you became a counselor. And somebody was talking to me about camp and passing and had said that you were there. And I was like, Roy's a counselor? Because I had always seen how you got treated.
mhm,
Even though we weren't like super close, like we were always in the same areas, especially on like the Sunday devos after church and all that. And I'm always, like I said, I pay attention to people. I'm a people watcher. I pick up
mhm.
on vibes. I'm very intuitive when it comes to that. I can tell if something is up. And I always was like, he gets shit on. And you were a counselor. And I was like, but
Yeah.
I always thought it was maybe your way of changing the narrative of giving these kids like a, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. You can still be spiritual, but you don't have to be an asshole.
Mhm. It's wild that you say you saw that because I didn't know that people
You
saw
feel
that.
invisible. I
Yeah,
know
I
because
felt,
it's very
yeah.
isolating, especially with
Mhm.
listening to your other podcasts of what you went through. I got so upset. That's why I sent you cookies because I was like, no, this man's getting his damn cookies.
Yeah, you
Um,
guys, yeah, y'all gave me cookies and they were delicious and it was hilarious. And it's weird because it was like triggering at the same time. It was hilarious, the feelings.
I was like, it's probably gonna bring a lot of emotions, but by God, he
It was
deserves
good.
some cookies. So I was
It
like,
was
what's
awesome.
better than cookies? Truffle cookies. So,
And we
um,
called it when you asked for my address. I told my wife, I was like, they're asked for my address. They're gonna send me something. She's like, I bet you $1,000 it's gonna be fucking
smart
cookies.
woman. Smart woman. Yes. I was like, he's getting us, which I had already been thinking about it. But then after your conversation with Steph, I was like, so I messaged her. I was like, let's do this for him because that's the least we can do because I feel like you don't realize the hurts that you're healing with this podcast from the
Yeah,
trauma. And I
well,
know it's for you
mhm,
too and healing, but truly like, and some of the stuff brought up, I'm like, it makes me feel icky, but it's like, oh, it wasn't just me. So it's less isolating because I feel like we just said at the time you didn't realize people were watching and maybe not a lot of people were because we were all wrapped
mhm,
up in our, but that's who I am as a person.
yeah.
And I think that's why you've stuck in my mind for all these years is because I saw that because you didn't conform to who they wanted you to look like. You had the spacers, you had, the vans, whatever, and you didn't do exactly what they wanted to do. And I always respected that about you. And that's why they were like, we can't get away with this nonsense with him because
mhm.
he still is, walking to the beat of his own drum, which I love. Um, and in turn, they were like, so we're going to punish him, which is so silly. But yeah, I mean, and then hearing every time that you never got date cookies, it made me so mad. I was like, what? So I was
Yeah.
like, we're sending him cookies.
It's sometimes I think like I'm glad I talked about the cookie thing because I think it brings up more problems with like society in general
Mhm.
with regards to how we treat boys.
Yeah.
That like boys need a cookie for every good thing they do. Um, but yeah, I mean, thank you for saying all that. I really do appreciate it. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, I don't want this to turn too much on
Oh,
me.
I'll
It's your
cry at
story,
one point, so it's okay.
but
No.
like, yeah, I became a counselor kind of because of that. For all the things that I felt that I was getting shit on or that were negative or that were
Hmm.
toxic, there were like 4 or 5 adult men in my life that were there for me at certain times
Yeah.
that kind of kept me away from going too far to the left. So I wanted to do that for kids. So yeah, I was a counselor for years. I mean, I got to be did it part-time and then I did it full-time for about four years.
That's yeah, when I heard that, I was just floored because I was like, they treated him like absolute dog shit. Like
Mhm.
what, and I, like I said earlier, I had no idea you were not baptized because you were always there. You were always doing everything with us. You were always involved. You were, I mean,
Yeah, I was trying
you
real
were
hard.
always one. Like when I listening to your story, I mean, I literally cried over
Yeah.
one of them because I was just like so heartbroken for you because I was like, he still showed up. And imagine being that kid still showing up and going through all this for people to treat you like that. Like that's not okay. And they did that to too many people,
Mhm.
especially as much as your parents did for the church. Like I have the best memories of your dad singing for communion and his booming voice. Like he was wonderful, and I'm so grateful I got to know him. And I know you miss him every day. And
Mhm.
what a great example that your parents. I mean, even with the church, they still gave you that guidance. But I mean, really, like I just felt like you got handed a terrible hand in this, and look at you though, like you did that and you should be proud. And I hope this is healing for you because
Yeah. Hmm.
it made me feel less alone because, I wasn't one of the popular ones. I never got treated that bad. But it just was like very eye-opening because I had no idea because no matter what they did to you, you were still there. You were still amazing to people,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
this is healing and I appreciate all that you're saying. I think that it just was like I want to do this because I'm not the only one, like you said. There are
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of us that have tried our hardest to make this work
Hmm.
and fit to some mold that somebody thought was the right mold.
Right.
And then you tell enough people, like you put enough people in power that believe them, and then they're just going to reiterate that story and reinforce that. And so I don't know. I I don't want people to feel like they're the only ones. That's why we're doing
Right.
this. That's why we're
And
sharing
that
this
speaks to
story.
your character. And I mean, that's amazing. And that's
Yeah.
awesome for your son to have that. So you should definitely take pride in that, especially when you have those tough moments of
Yeah.
thinking about what you went through, because damn, look at you now.
Well,
And
I
that kid
think it's
is
the same for
lucky.
all of us that are standing here that are having a somewhat stable life
Yeah.
should feel that too, because it wasn't it wasn't God that did this. It was a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
let's talk about this stuff. So
Okay.
we had camp, we had this great stuff, everything's positive. Like when did it get weird for you?
Um, so I think I started studying, I think I started and just stopped at in eighth grade at one point. And I had gotten my first boyfriend at school.
Ooh.
And I told this girl, and because I was excited, she was like, "Aren't you studying?" And I was like, "Yes," which I knew you weren't supposed to have a boyfriend or not. And I said, "We don't do anything," like literally, I was so awkward.
Yeah.
I was so awkward because I didn't know anything about relationships because it was so like no. And I was like, I'm not gonna ask what relationships are supposed to be like because it's a no-no. So I have no interest in it. But he had asked me to be his girlfriend, and then I never talked to him. I was like so insecure. I'm like, what do I talk to this guy about? And I don't want it to be inappropriate and, whatever. But it was so, yeah, he broke up with me. Surprise, surprise, because I just was like, oh, we're together. I can't talk to you now. But I had told this girl at church, and I remember it literally got back to my parents that night. And I remember my mom exactly where we were. We were in our old house in the living room, and she was sitting in the chair, and I was sitting in her lap. And she was talking to me about it, and I was like, well, I just didn't she goes, if you're wanting to study, this is just not the focus that you need. It wasn't that I couldn't have a boyfriend, but she wanted me to focus on the church and the people and all of that. And then so that's when it kind of started. I was like, oh, like you really can't, like they really do mean that you can't
But
like have
someone,
a significant other.
but you told a friend,
Uh-huh.
and then it got back to your mom.
Uh-huh.
That's wild.
That night, that was on a Wednesday night. I remember sitting in the synagogue on the floor in this big ass room, and we were talking, and I was like, "Yeah, I was so excited because somebody actually saw me." And so it was like it kind of burst my bubble in the fact of I wasn't allowed to, and that made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't worthy of somebody being attracted to me. That's how it came off to me because I'm very insecure. Like I have some serious body dysmorphia to this day from the comments that were made to me or situations. And actually, that same friend
Hmm.
lived in my neighborhood down the road, and I was over at her house one day. This was maybe 10th grade, ninth, 10th grade, after I'd become a disciple at this point. And we had gone swimming, and we had literally just come in. And she had little brothers, and one of them made a comment about my boobs. And she was like
Wow.
mortified. So she goes and tells her dad. And I will never forget it. He looks right at me, looks at my chest, and looks back up. And it was a fully covered bathing suit, by the way. And he goes, well, maybe you should put some clothes on.
What the fuck?
That
Doesn't
was the last
talk
time
to
I
the
was in.
boy. Doesn't talk to
Huh?
the boys about what he said.
No, no. Maybe you should
God.
put some clothes on. And I just remember being like so sick to my stomach, like, oh my gosh, I just put myself out there. I deserved this because that's how they had you think. And that was the last time I was invited to their house. I remember that now thinking about that story. But yeah, except for like the Wednesday night, whatever, when we would, or Friday nights, whenever we would do the get together at the houses or whatever. That was the only time I was ever invited back. Yeah, it was just like, and I just felt, it made me feel so gross. Like I was the problem. Like, you know, your body's gross. You need to cover it up. He doesn't want to see that. He doesn't need to see that. You're disgusting. And so, like, that stuck with me forever. That's gonna make me cry talking about that because that just like
Mhm.
light off. But yeah, I mean, it was so that's kind of eighth grade is when it got weird. But I
So
saw that
this
my parents
happened.
were into that. So
I don't want to interrupt. I'm
no,
just
no.
so, like, you have someone tells on you that you
Mm-hmm.
have a boyfriend, and then you make
Yep.
it mean that you're bad.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing? Right.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then,
absolutely. I was like, oh, like I'm not supposed to do that. And, they don't want me to have a boyfriend because they don't think I'm good enough or I'm not, the right person for this situation. And so, and that's just where my insecurities were because I had
Mhm.
already felt not great anyways about myself, but just to, have people make those comments. But it was that night my mom was having a talk with me and she was so sweet about it. Like I remember the conversation so clearly with my mom and she was so kind about it. She was like, if you're not wanting to study, that's okay. And I was like, no, I like that's what I want to do because I wanted them to
Mhm.
be proud of me. And my parents were always proud of me. So it's so ridiculous thinking about it now. But I mean, even to this day, I still struggle with being the black sheep, even though my sisters and my parents are like, shut up, you're not. I mean, that's all me. That's my insecurities, and that's what I have to work through. But yeah, I mean, it
Well,
was that quick. So that's when I first started being like, okay, that's weird.
and that's
Um,
so hard because, like, having a boyfriend isn't wrong, first
right.
off.
I can't even
Uh,
talk to the guy. I mean,
and then, but it's like, but then soon after that, you're coming in from a pool. Was the pool at a house?
it was in the neighborhood.
Okay,
So,
so
and
you were
it
just
was
coming
just down
back.
the
Yeah,
road from them. Yeah.
sure. And you're coming back in,
Hmm.
and then you're shamed instead of protected.
Hmm.
And it's just, I think that what it triggers in
Never
me is
once
this,
was he said, hey, it's inappropriate. Don't talk about a woman's body like that. No, it was, let me stare you up and down and make you feel uncomfortable
fuck.
and tell you you need to put clothes on.
Mhm. It's just so damaging, and it's this thing that, like, all I can think about is this like conversations are so important
Hmm.
because had the conversation been different, it could have been a very empowering
Oh,
situation
absolutely.
for you. And we don't want to, I'm not trying to damn
No,
anybody for what they're saying. They were not that I'm sticking up for this guy, because what
no,
that
yeah,
dad said
absolutely.
was
I
fucking
mean, we were all
stupid.
in that, like that
Yeah.
same mindset. It was everybody. So I get it.
But you just
And
it
it was just, and this is the thing. I had on like like the windbreaker pants, whatever the Adidas they were
mhm.
called back in the day. I had on those, and so it was just the bathing suit top, and it was just wild to me. I was like, oh, okay. And then I just felt so sick because I was like, he just got upset with me. I don't like people getting upset with me. So I was already like, your dad's mad at me. That's not okay. I'm so sorry. Like, obviously you're at a friend's house. You're always on your best behavior.
Mhm.
And so I just was like, there was multiple things going on that I was just like mortified. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It just was like, it was wild. But yeah, that was the last time I was ever invited over.
It's so
Because I
fucked.
wore my bathing suit because
Mhm.
we were swimming.
You were doing exactly what you were supposed to be doing. You know,
Yeah.
like you're wearing a bathing suit to a pool, and you're doing it in a normal person would.
Yeah,
God, that sucks. And it's just
it
hard
does.
because, like, for us as kids in that, the conversations were so different. And
Mhm.
I think most of our conversations, especially with the authority figures in our life, or not
Yeah.
with the church more than the parents, were like led to just internalization, shame, and guilt.
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
And everybody was so, a lot of people are like, well, aren't you mad with your parents? And I'm absolutely not. We all started before it really got to how it did.
Mm.
And you were so wrapped in at that point that when these changes started happening, it wasn't like an overnight change. That's what people don't understand. It wasn't that overnight change. So that mindset was very much a seed planted in your brain
Mhm.
constantly, but subtle enough that you don't realize something's off um, until situations like that happen. And so, I mean, we were just as invested as our parents,
Mhm.
and as you've spoken before, I mean, it was our life. It was every day of the week, just about. You were with church, you were doing something with church, or,
Mhm.
whatever it was, which in turn I was very sheltered. Like I had a very good childhood. I have nothing but good memories about my childhood overall, minus some of the experiences here. But so I don't have complaints of that. But I was very sheltered going into the real world. And so now I think I'm a little too open with my own children because I don't want them to ever feel like one, I'm lying to them, or two, I'm not preparing them for the real world. And so my kids probably know, my sister and I were just having this conversation. They probably know a little more than they should. So I went from one extreme of not knowing anything to telling my children too much, where I'm like, oh, that's an adult thing. You don't need to worry. So I'm trying right now to find that balance,
Oh,
16 years after becoming a mom. But um,
we've told
I
our we've told our kid way
yeah,
more than I was ever told, and he's not
yeah.
even 5 yet, and
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
bananas. But
You want to be transparent with them because I feel like maybe a lot of us felt like we didn't get that transparency because
Mhm.
everything was so fake. Like I was so fake. I would say, "Oh yes, I'm having my quiet time in the morning," and I sure as hell was not. I did not like mornings. In fact, until I started my depression medication last year, did I have a conversation in the morning time with people. Now I can wake up and I'm okay. But before I hated life in 2 hours you had to give me before I was able to converse with you. But I did not want to get up in the mornings. I don't think I ever had a quiet time except at camp
Oh
when
man.
everybody would do that. But
Those camp quiet times though.
we're the
Ooh.
best.
I remember wanting so hard for people to notice me when I was in the dining hall having a quiet
Oh
time.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
oh
That's your
my
time to
God.
shine.
If I wanted to have my Bible out, I wanted to have
Yep.
my cool journal. I wanted to make sure I had a book, a DPI
Yep.
book,
Oh yeah,
and then because
absolutely.
because I remember like because when I became a counselor, I just remember hearing you would overhear all these comments, and they'd be like, "Oh, there's so and so. Look at him having his quiet time. He's so spiritual." Like, look at this guy
You're
having
like,
a
oh, look
quiet
at me.
time. Look at this kid. This like he's in high school
Yeah.
having quiet time with these 10-year-olds. Oh my God, he's such a
Especially when you didn't have many wins outside of camp, you needed all the
yeah.
wins you could get
Oh
then.
man. Yeah. So, and it's funny to think like a lot of people, it's hard for people to understand, like, okay, you're feeling this shame and all this stuff. So then, like, why study the Bible? You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's just how wrapped up you were. You were like,
Hmm.
it's maybe shaming. You kind of justify it as, well, I have this shame because I'm not a disciple, because I'm not studying, because I'm not serious, I'm not giving it all to God.
Hmm.
Um, and I saw they were allowed to date. Well, go on dates. They weren't allowed
Hmm.
to date,
Yeah.
but they were allowed to go on dates. They had all these different activities. And from the outside looking in, you're like, you get to go do this, this, and this many days a week. You're not at home. You're not bored. You're not having to do homework, whatever, during those times. So it was very appealing, especially for a teenager, an insecure teenager at that. And so I was like, you know what? I think this would make my parents happy. They never once asked me. They never once pressured me to, but I was like, I think this would make them happy. Um, and so I did, but I knew by that point. So that situation with the friend, ratting me out, snitches get
Hmm.
stitches, girl. Um, that happened in eighth grade. I think in ninth grade is when I was like, oh, okay, well, I learned my lessons on what not to do that first go around. So I knew this time what I needed to do, what I needed to say, how I needed to say it. So I literally faked my way through all the studies, um, because I learned how to be very fake because I did not want to let anybody down. I wanted to be that people please. I wanted people to hear what they wanted to hear. I didn't want them to hear opposite. So that's really when I turned in the just fake as hell. I mean, about everything.
Really?
Um, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, I yeah. Thankfully, my parents never, because you weren't allowed to have friends outside of the church. And you weren't supposed to go hang out with them because the
Hmm.
whole yoke together with unbelievers story that I heard
Hmm.
1,000 times and was told, my parents never kept us from hanging out with friends, um, as long as they felt like they were good friends, which
Yeah.
I had some pretty good friends outside of the church. So I thankful for that because when I eventually left, I had already built other friendships that carried me through that time. And it wasn't as difficult of a transition because I kind of had like slowly started not giving a crap towards the end,
Yeah.
little stuff here and there. And then I just was so over like how bad it had gotten. I remember the last event that I went to, and it was a Sunday after church. It was the Sunday devotional. Um, and the
Hmm.
team leader, kind of like what she did to Steph, she did to me. Um, and that whole sermon that she was preaching that day or whatever, they were talking about sharp people, which I've heard that spoken a lot, how that's a trigger.
Fucking
It is.
word.
I hate that. I hate when people are like, oh, it's sharp. I can't even say that to my kids without feeling gross. I'm like, oh. um it was like, share your faith, but with sharp people. We want sharp people. It was all based around that. And me and this girl Ashley were sitting next to each other, and she was also one that wasn't in the popular crowd, which I was friends with everybody. So it wasn't like
Mhm.
I was shunned out, but she really was not, and she was kind of like your situation. And we just both looked at each other and were like, so I guess we're chopped liver because we're not considered their sharp. Like, it was just so disgusting. And at that point I was
Mhm.
so over it, and I had gotten a taste of the real world, and it was a lot more fun,
Yeah.
a lot more freeing. Um, and so I was just like, and then after that, when Julie came at me like she did, and I just was like, about something about a sin study, like a sin I didn't disclose. And this was me being a disciple for 3, 4 years at this point. And I'm like, I didn't even remember, like, girl, I don't remember what I ate for breakfast half the time. Like, what? Are you serious? So she is like literally rebuking me in front of God and everybody at this. And I just looked at her and I was like, okay. And that was it. That was the last time I went. I got home that day, and that's when I told my parents, which leading up to that was really hard
I bet.
because you have to mentally prepare yourself for that, because, which I'm all over. I'm sorry, I'm ADD and my medicine is not good.
It's okay.
um,
I've written down things
you
of
know
where
what
they're
I
going to
mean?
come back
But
to.
like, like leading up to that, that's your whole life. You were with these people for years, at least 5 days a week. Your world revolved around it. everything, like they made you feel like the church held the family together. And so how dare you break that apart because you're going to destroy your family. And I lost sleep for 6 months over, I'm making this decision and this is going to destroy my family. And I think so much of my family that
Yeah.
I did not want to be that person, but it got to the point I couldn't do it anymore. And that was really hard. It wasn't the leaving the friends behind because I didn't lose any friends. The ones that I still talk
Hmm.
to today, excuse me, were there. I inhaled something. Um, one moment.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
All right.
But they were there before, so I didn't lose out on that. It was my family that I was worried about.
What a
I'm gonna
bunch
mute
of,
you so I can cough.
it's
Sorry.
okay. It's just what a lot to have to carry
Mhm.
as a
Yeah,
kid.
it was.
You're not thinking about yourself at all. You're thinking about everyone else besides the person that matters the most in this
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, which was me.
Yeah. When you mentioned like hanging out with friends, were you allowed to spend the night at your friends' houses that weren't a part
Yeah,
of the church? Lucky. I was never
yeah,
allowed to spend the night at friends' church. I remember I went to because when I went to my prom, I wasn't a part of the church, and I had a bunch of friends,
yeah,
like you outside, and I had to come home. Like I wasn't allowed to like spend the night
yeah.
at a friend's house or anything like
It
that.
had
That
to be
was the
somebody
one.
they knew, like
Mhm.
really well. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Like I had a friend since kindergarten,
Hmm.
actually 3 years old, and we're still friends to this day. We talk every day. And I had a really good friend from third grade on, and I would stay with her. Um, and then just a couple of friends, but I was so wrapped up in all of this that I didn't really care to. I was more like, oh, I want to stay at this person's house that was in the church. So
Yeah.
um, you know,
I mean, good for you for being able to fake it, man, and get through it. I
I don't
mean,
know how because now I'm terrible. Like I cannot hide anything on my face because you're gonna know how I feel about something
oh,
before it comes out of my mouth.
I should have
I was
asked you
very
for
fake.
tips and tricks because I tried real hard to do
Like the cross study, I did not shed a single tear, not
it.
one. I was so desensitized to it. And then, they're telling all this graphic stuff, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I feel like you're lying because I feel like this is just a story made up, and
Hmm.
but I knew I had to cry. I knew I had to show some kind of emotion. So I was like, let me pretend to be super overwhelmed with it. And so they weren't going to move forward. I don't think they didn't stop it. Hang on. Sorry, my dog's chewing on something. They didn't say that, at least to me, but I knew, like I could tell, like I said,
Hmm.
I can tell. Um, and so like that next event that we were together, I was like, yeah, I was going over the notes and I was reading it, and I just started sobbing, and I'm so grateful for, just the biggest bullshit ever. And they were like, oh, that's awesome. Let's keep going.
They're like, yes, we broke them. We got another one.
And that is literally the only study I remember, like hearing you talk about the studies. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. I forgot about, because
Hmm.
I blocked all that out because it just was so silly. Like I was just trying to get through it so that I could make my parents proud.
Yeah.
And so that I could go on these dates and that I could, do all these events that I would eventually hate going to these events. It's funny. Sometimes the thing that attracts you to people is what drives you away.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and so that was kind of it for me. And so I was like, I've got to fake this. I've got, I have nothing going for me, but I can pretend to be this spiritual girl. And yeah, I'm terrible at faking stuff now. Like genuinely, I think I used all my ability back then because now I can't at all.
Well, it just
It's pretty ridiculous.
the whole system, it was all about optics and how you looked and
Mhm.
how you presented yourself in the front. And it just taught you that love is about what you do and for me it was like love is like what you're doing and how you look.
Oh yeah.
Because the people that were in front all looked a certain way. And
Oh
the
yeah.
people that seemed to be the most sharp or the most spiritual all ended up looking a certain way.
Hmm.
And instead of like really trying to find connection to the source or whatever it is, you're trying to please these people, or for me it was make yourself into that person
Yeah.
until
Oh,
you
absolutely.
just couldn't, until for me I just couldn't fucking do it anymore. And then
Yeah, you're like, no.
but
Well, I
you know,
mean,
you
three
just,
times of studying, that's a bit excessive. Like that's insane. So
yeah. But yeah, so what was your baptism like? Like, was it like, did you like, because
it
I'm
was at
sure when
church.
you're,
Yeah, it wasn't like one in the pool or anything. Um,
was it in front
I
of everybody?
remember, yeah, which I don't like.
Hmm.
It makes me so icky and uncomfortable. My dad baptized me, and that my dad is amazing. I absolutely adore my dad. Everybody that knows my dad adores my dad. He is genuinely like when you think of what a Christian should be, that's my dad to this
Hmm.
day. And he was just so proud, and he always gets emotional over his girls. He doesn't get emotional over anything, but he gets emotional over his girls, and he was just so proud. And
Hmm.
that's what I was looking for. And my mom too. My mom was just sitting there beaming with pride, and she was always our biggest supporter. And so that was that was very nice. That part I hated that was in front of everybody. I think there was another teen getting baptized that day, and then I don't know why I remember this, but there was an older lady, not older, she's probably my age now, like what I was now. She had on a Terry Clark shirt because I liked Terry Clark. She's a country singer at the time. And so I just that stuck out. And I was like, oh, that's fun that you would have that shirt on. And I like Terry Clark and I'm getting baptized. So she got baptized first and then me. I mean, it was nice to have that encouragement and all that, but it was very heartwarming for me to see my mom and dad just so happy and
Hmm.
so encouraged and just proud and emotional over it because it is like when you're in all of this, it is an emotional thing. You're and I the whole time I'm like, I'm totally faking this and they're so proud, but I was like, I can't give up now. Like I gotta keep going
You
because
knew, like, you were conscious of the fact, like,
oh
you're
yeah.
faking this whole
Oh yeah.
time. That
Hmm.
is wild.
Hmm. Oh yeah. I was bad. I was it made well, I very much enjoyed the community, the friendships, all of that. I hated that we had discipler partners that we didn't really know. I had one that she had zero personality. She was impossible to talk to. And I was like, of course I'm stuck with this one, like not one that I know. And then all the leaders' kids, they were all discipled by one person, which was the team leader or team
Hmm.
leader.
Yep.
Because that's how that went. And they all got to sit on the front and, couldn't get in their way. So,
Yeah.
I was
Now,
like, I can at least do this.
did you mean like teen worker, or because I don't remember teens
No,
having discipling partners. I only remember teen workers.
the leader of the teens for our sector. So,
Uh-huh.
the married couple that
Hmm.
led the
Yeah.
teens for us, they disciple they discipled the leaders' children. So
Uh-huh.
the group of leaders, girls, there was like a handful of them. There's quite a few. They were all discipled by her and
Yeah.
nobody else. And so then we got the other ones that were just, I mean, this girl, I don't even remember her name. Like I just had zero connection to her. She
Uh-huh.
was impossible to talk to. She like made you feel you had to fill that uncomfortable silence because she'd just stare at you.
Sucks.
Yeah, it did. Until well, my last discipler that I had, I loved, and I still keep in touch with her.
Hmm.
So it is what it is. But yeah, I would literally go to the point of if they ask me about my quiet time, I have to have something at hand ready to go. So I would take all those notes on Sunday, not paying attention to what they're preaching about, really, because I don't retain that information. I'm just like, oh, it's done. Okay, let's go. Because I would space out half the time, but I would take my notes so I could be like, oh, I'm studying this, what we talked about Sunday or whatever,
God.
just so to be ready that I had something. Or at one point I even like took out my Sunday notes and pasted it into my quiet time journal. That was all nonsense.
Man.
Just to be like it's there because I was like, I have to be prepared. So I had to, if I was faking, I had to go all in. And I did because I was like, I can't let anybody down. They have to know that I'm perfect and that I don't mess up and I'm all in this and they can't rebuke me for this and they can't tell on me. So I mean it's so ridiculous the links that I went to
Yeah, but you were so
instead of being
good
a
at it.
kid.
Like, I wish I could have thought of those things that you're thinking of. Because, like, I was always like, did you have a quiet time today? And I was like, oh God, I didn't. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, like I don't
Oh,
want to tell on myself. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. And and it's so funny though, because never once did my older sister call me out. And believe me, she would have, because she and I were not as close as we are now.
yeah.
I mean, we went through a time where we were closer, but she for sure would have at least dragged me out to my mom and dad, never to anybody in the church, because she's got my back always.
Good
But
on
she
her.
never did. And I know she knew I wasn't getting up early. I know my parents knew I was not getting up early, because they'd come in there 20 times being like, Kristin, your alarm has been going off for an hour. Get out of bed.
Yeah.
So they were they were the OGs for that, for not ratting me out, because they had to know I was not doing that.
Yeah, oh man, those teen workers with stuff. God, it was bananas.
It was.
I had a couple of really good ones, and then,
Hmm.
I got stuck with the ones that were trying to be, I guess the leaders in the church or something, and they were always a little bit more hardcore, and oh God.
Oh, you really just got the short end of the stick, man. You
I
really
mean, I
did.
did, but I didn't, because like I think that if I think I did in a lot of ways. I will own up to that. Like there was a lot of shit, but there were moments, there's always that where it could have boiled over, and
Hmm.
something or someone was involved that kept it from boiling over. And I think that's
Oh,
what
that's
kept
good.
me in it so long.
And
Like,
that's how they do that, though. That's how they keep you. They're like,
yeah,
oh, we pushed a little too much. Let's reel it back in and build them up just to break them down again. Like that's what happened to
yeah.
me, anyways.
And
I
it,
can't speak for you,
and
but
when I had like a teen worker tell me, because I was scared about a noise I heard, I mentioned this a while back,
mhm.
and he said, "Oh yeah, I'd be scared too, because if you died today, you'd go to hell." But for everyone that said that, there was another one that would just sit with me and listen to me, and I felt seen and heard.
Right.
That,
You had that healthy mix, the ones that
yeah,
were like what you were doing with camp, being
hmm
that change, being that difference of, hey, you're human, you're perfect
hmm
the way you are. Let's do this.
and then
Yeah,
and
you
then I
had this.
became and then I
You
became a
became
teen
that
worker.
because of, I mean, that's what I saw anyways. But again,
Yeah,
and you and I were not in the same world all the time. Like we saw each other maybe a couple times a month. So it's not like I saw you a ton. Like I very vividly remember growing up with you. I remember your parents, and I remember having
hmm
conversations with you, and enjoying that. And when I saw you, like I said, I saw you so often, or often enough, that I thought you were baptized this whole time. So when I found out you weren't in high school, I was floored. Floored.
yeah. A lot of people didn't know that. What I was gonna say is I think I hold the record as a teen worker for the zero baptisms. Like I helped zero teenagers
You
get
know
baptized.
what? I hope that helped you sleep at night, genuinely, because you did not bring them to the dark side.
I know.
The
I don't
cult.
know.
So I think
Uh,
that's a great record to have.
Yep.
I'm just
I'm
saying.
into it. So is this what you meant by like you were leading a double life? It was like you were doing this, but not, it was just you were just putting on this like facade.
Yeah. And I really tried. Like I really wanted to, I think it still kind of like with my feelings of religion and if there's a God, like I don't know what I believe. I know that something had to create us, but I can't believe that somebody that's supposed to, like, you're supposed to pray to, or, look for guidance, or, kick you in the butt when you need it. I can't justify them doing that. So that's where it's hard for me to disconnect that this was people, and then this has got, like, to this day I have panic attacks trying to go to church. I finally found one that I could sit through, because it was a
Yeah.
small church. The preacher was cool as hell. He's like, I'm a preacher, but I sometimes cuss. And that was the most genuine and real person I'd ever met. And he never once invited me to his church. And like he would invite other people, but he had spoken with me before,
hmm
um, about it. And so he was like very respectful of the fact that I don't want anything to do with it. Like I literally have had full on panic attacks trying to go to church. And so he never invited me. So I told my husband, I was like, you know what? We're going to go to his church and try it out, because he didn't invite me. And that's what I like. So he thought that was so funny. And we joke now because literally the Sunday that I went to church, which I was like hyperventilating in the parking lot, Mason was like, you're going in. You told this man that you're coming. You're going to stick to your word. And I was like, I hate you. I don't really. He's wonderful. But, we went in. It was It was the last church service they had before COVID shut down. So we always joked that I went back to church and I shut all the churches
Yeah.
down because, hell was excited about that.
Way to
Oh,
go.
so
You
we
shut
still
the
to
world
this
down
day,
because of your dirty, dirty sin.
yes. I always tell people, I'm like, you don't want me to touch that Bible, it will burst in flames, or the building will go up in flames, or it will shut down again if I try and go. But I've had, I went with Todd to the break off of the church. What was it, North River?
Wait, which
Um,
one? Depends. If it was when you were
not
like adults,
Yes, I think I was a mom at this point. It's one in Alpharetta.
oh, then you went to North View.
That. Um, I went into there and I just was like, it's literally the same people, it's the same message. It's the same. I had stepped outside because I couldn't stand sitting in there. And one of my friend's moms, who I were friends on Facebook still, and she's no longer part, but she was talking about, with somebody else, and she didn't know I could hear her. She was talking about, this is the same thing. I'm getting in trouble for coming in late when they have no idea what I just went through at home. And I'm here and I'm showing up, but I'm getting rebuked because I'm late. And I was like, this place is never going to change. So I was like, I told Todd, I said, I love you, but I will never come back and visit with you. I'm sorry. Like, that was too much for me. And I went with my friend to a place that's here in Cartersville that's like really big. It's very much reminds me of our church growing up.
Hmm.
Very loud, very involved. All like there's so many similarities. So the first time I went in there, I just like started crying and had to walk outside. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was like, I'm getting trapped back in this. I can't do that. So I mean, that's made it hard when it comes to, my kids are curious about God and church and all that. And I want that for them. I want them to figure it out on their own, but I don't want to be going to the church with them, which is
Hmm.
difficult when, your kids can't drive at the time. So
Yeah.
that was always a struggle with them. Like, in fact, my youngest just told me yesterday, he was like, I want to get baptized. I said, well, we don't go to church. And he was like, well, how would I do that? And I said, if we need to find a church, okay, but I'm just telling you, it's gonna be difficult for me, but I will do that for you. Like,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
it's
it's hard. It's hard. Like I
you're
try
scared to get
all the
sucked
time.
in.
I try all the time to
Yeah,
go to churches. And I mean, I've done I've done a tour of churches where I go in with my little notebook, but it's more research for what I'm working on
I love
versus
that.
yeah, like I've been to most of the churches in this Virginia Beach area
Mhm.
as like I don't want to call it a spy. I like to think that I'm like a maybe an
You're
undercover
showing this is
journalist.
how it's supposed to be, and this is how it was with us, and it's not right.
Yeah, but like, and I try to like put myself in there, but like as soon as things start happening that are like what I'm used to or what I've seen or it like
And it freaks
triggers
you out.
the pain, it's like I can't. And then when I like think about if I'm going to join something and have my kid there, it's like that's even harder to
Hmm.
like accept
Oh
because
yeah.
you don't
And
want.
leaving them with the kids ministry because you don't know what
Yeah.
they're telling these
Hmm.
kids, what stories they're telling, or whatever. I mean, it's really hard, that trust, because of what you went through, and you're still trying to heal from it 20 years later. I mean,
Hmm.
that speaks volumes. I mean, it really does. I mean, that's how I am with my kids. I will never forget. Chandler, my oldest, was wanting to go to church, and it was around Christmas time. And I was like, you know what? We could go to a church close by, and it'll be their Christmas event, whatever. It will be
Hmm.
fine. So we go, and this lady's at the door, and she starts talking to me, and she was like, oh, is this your first time? And I was like, yeah, we're just here for, this. My son went to go to church. She was like, oh, we have all these women groups and Bible study, and I just like started like visibly shaking. My hands were trembling, and she looked at me and she was like, are you okay? And I said, please do not ask me to be involved in your church. I said, I know that's going to sound wild, but I grew up in a really terrible situation with church, and it's huge that I'm here, but I'm literally shaking, and it's so ridiculous. I'm like,
I'm
why
sorry
am
that I'm
I shaking
laughing,
like
but I'm
this?
just like, oh my God,
No, it's
it's
so
like.
funny because it's like, what? Like, but you get so sucked in, and it was so hard getting out of that
Mhm.
and out of that mindset that I'm so scared I will get sucked back in without realizing it. So as soon as I
Yeah.
mean, it was before we even walked in the doors, and I just am like, quite literally trembling. And Chandler's like, Mom, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing.
My
You
Lord.
know, but yeah, it's true. I mean, it's crazy. It's wild. But yeah,
But
that's
for the positive, I like to think that it's given me a really high bullshit monitor.
oh yeah,
So where it's
absolutely.
like if someone's like, no, this is the place, I'm like,
Sure it
sure,
is.
sure, man. This is the
Absolutely.
place. This is the answer. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Convince me otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right. Cause I'm like, okay. Or,
But it's
kids will talk, I'll hear kids talking about their church and stuff that they do. And I'm like, that sounds a little culty.
it does sound a little, I was something that triggers me and scares me is if I see a group of nice looking college kids coming walking around and getting closer to me because
You're
I
like, oh
if
God,
I
they're sharing their faith with me.
I was like if I see that it happened at the beach down here. I was like sitting and I watched like there was like some nice college kids looking and they were like standing in a circle near the water and I was like, "Oh crap, they're probably praying
Oh yeah.
for open-hearted people to share their faith with." And like I was like freaking out that they were going to come walking up
You're like,
to
don't
me
talk
to
to me. Don't talk
ask.
to
And then I look at and then I like tell my wife that and she was saying something like, "That's what you were thinking about?" Like
me.
I
And
was
you're like,
looking over
can I be invisible again? Please don't see me.
she was like, "That's what you're worried about and freaking out about that you need to go walk away." Like
Yes.
there's literally a group of people over there that look like they're about to do something super stupid. Like they might have their, might set off fireworks or something or do something like that. And you're scared someone's gonna like walk up to you and share their faith with you.
But it's true. Like,
It is
it's so
true.
true. You were
It's
forced to do this on Sundays at the mall or where, oh, I
Mhm.
hated that because
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't want to talk to these people. One, I was just uncomfortable anyways, which on the other hand, I mean, it taught us great conversational skills. I mean, I
sure.
will absolutely give the positives where the positives are due, but I mean, I can conversate with a wall and make it talk back to me. Um, but so I can talk to anybody, anything. But yeah, it was the anxiety. Like it's so funny. I hated it. And to this day, I hate going to people's door and knocking on it. I'm so
Mhm.
terrified of like that initial, what do you want or whatever, but that, you met with people when you were sharing your faith and they're like, get away from me, you weirdo. So like going to friends' houses, I'm like, I don't want to knock on the door. I'm so freaked out about going in. Like if I'm alone, I'm like, nope, you can come outside. I'll text you, hey, I'm here.
Oh,
I'm not
geez,
coming
that's
to your
wild.
door.
Hmm.
It's so silly. I'm ridiculous, but that's okay because I own
No,
that.
you're not ridiculous. It's fun. So like, God, what was so you leave, you give it up. Like, what was it like those years after?
Wonderful and crazy and scary all at the same time. Like I said, I started like I was already living the double life, but it really like a true double life of like I said, I had my first kiss at 16. I was still in the church at 16. I didn't leave till I was 17, almost 18.
Oh, you
Um,
Jezebel.
I was a little hussy. And that was the extent. But it's like, and we've talked about this so many times about how the church and like, you can't make anybody struggle. You can't show anything, whatever, God forbid your collarbone show, because you'll make the brother struggle or because it'll make them want to touch themselves inappropriately, all that. Like, I was so scarred by that to this day, if somebody starts talking about like touching themselves, I'm like, don't talk to me about that. That's nasty. Like, don't do that. But like, literally, because it was, you can't even say it out loud. And I'm like, it's masturbation. It's okay to say that. Like, we're adults. I'm
Mhm.
almost 40, grow up. But it was just like so icky, especially talking to somebody of the opposite sex. I mean, we would get in big trouble. But
Mhm.
it was so pounded in our head that this is a no-no, you don't think about this stuff, you're not lusting and all that I never until I was 16 had those thoughts of anything like that. I was like, ew, no. Like, yeah, I like that attention that a guy wants to pay attention to me. I was like so put on the back burner by everything else so that when I did get attention from a guy, I was an attention whore. I was like, oh my gosh, like I just craved that attention
Mhm.
because the man could make me feel better, and because I never got that because I was always second to everybody else. And
Mhm.
so it was just It was wild. So I started at 16. I would tell my parents I was going to somebody's house in the church, and I was really going to my girlfriend's house that I'd known since third grade, and was going out and partying with her and hanging out and all that. Still like limited on what I was doing. I was still a good girl. But I was like, I like this freedom. So I started getting that freedom more and more. And then that kind of helped my confidence when I was at school. And, I went to school at Walton with everybody, where there's eyes on you at all times. And, so I just started becoming, because at that point was when Chad and Steph were getting their nonsense. And I was like, this isn't right. Like, these people are good people. They're coming to all this stuff and you're treating them like garbage because they like each other. That's it, because they like each other. So like that all helped me kind of get the courage to be like, enough is enough.
Hmm.
So it wasn't too difficult in that aspect. Like, even though I went to school with all these people, they had already just cast me
Wrote you
off
off.
because I wasn't as sharp as them. Even though I wasn't bad, like I just didn't fake like I wasn't as into it as them. Like, I faked how I needed to, but I just was like, I kind of separated myself because I was like, oh, you're not my true friend, like I'll say hey to you because we go to church together and you have to be friends. But and then like I will
Yeah.
never forget. So one of the girls and guys that I grew up with, they had started liking each other. I think it was like senior year, which I was on the outskirts at this point. And I'm like, they're literally like so flirty and touchy-feely. And if we were at church, they would be like discipling other people or talking down about being impure and all that, but they're literally doing this at school. And I'm like, that's stupid. So, I see all this stuff and I'm just like, I'm doing this stuff and I'm doing it in private away from like the people that I go to church with and go to school with, because this girl did not go to my school anymore because I moved. And so I was like, and that kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to be like, this is not normal behavior for a church. Like, this is, and my friend that I've known since I was 3, the one that I still talk to. I mean, remember in middle school, her being like, this is a cult. I was like, no, it's not. How dare you? Like, no way. You just don't like church and whatever. I was so stupid. So it was like stuff like that, those things started coming back, like, this is not normal. And I met one of my really good friends freshman year of high school, and still great friends to this day, and she was not a part of it, and she was always like, what? um that's crazy. Like, don't one of the church families lived in her neighborhood. She would be like, this man was talking to my dad or my mom, and he was totally hitting on her, like inviting her to his church and blah blah blah. And I died because I knew exactly who it was. And I go, oh, he was just sharing his faith. He doesn't like her. She was like, bullshit. He was totally like, hey, you need to come. It was so funny. Like, we still laugh about that to this day because I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's still convinced that he was hitting on her mom to this day. And I will tell
We
you
were
off who
so
it
like
was, because she will
aggressive.
laugh and be like, no, they're awkward. Because I know
We
you
were
know who it is too. But it was so funny. And I just was like, and she would just be like, that's weird. Like, don't invite me to your church. I'm not going. And I was like, fair enough. I'm not gonna invite you because I needed a safe space to be me.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, and she was that and still is to this day. And so I was very fortunate that I had that to kind of make that decision easier.
Yeah.
Really what I struggled with, because I'd already been cast out by so many people at this point that um I didn't really care. Like, I was at that point where I just did not care. I was like, you aren't my true friends. Like, yes, we've grown up together, and yes, I will always appreciate our time together because I did need that at that time in my life, but not anymore. I don't need friends like this. Um, but it was destroying my family, or what they made me think would destroy my family. And I broke my dad's heart, and that killed me. Like, it killed me. After that Sunday that lady called me out for something really stupid, and then they were talking about, I had already just been like, it was leaving a bad taste in my mouth that they were so focused on appearances
Hmm.
over spirituality, or what you're supposed to do. And all these new rules were being brought in, and it was just like you couldn't breathe wrong around them without getting rebuked, unless you were one of the leaders' children and you
Yeah.
did no wrong. or in that group of people. Like I will never remember. I had on a shirt that was like a thick strap tank top, and I got in trouble for that because it was showing too much shoulder. But one of the leader's daughters wore spaghetti straps to church all the time and never got in trouble, like
Mm.
never. And I was like, are you kidding? So just stuff like that, the constant like, oh, their parents are in leadership, they get to do whatever they want. They're the golden children. They all look one way, like we've talked about. And so I was just kind of like over that. I was finally old enough to be like, I can stand up for myself now, maybe a little bit, and I'm going to, because
Yeah.
I still wasn't confident in that. Um, and it was the telling my parents that I just couldn't do it anymore. And I told them that Sunday when I got home, I just was like, this is probably going to destroy our family. And I'm terrified about that because, the church had you feel like you left, you destroyed your family, you put them all apart. You guys would have nothing to do with each other. And I'm like, I'm a senior in high school. I have nowhere to go. I have, no, I do have connections outside of the church, but nobody that'd be like, hey, come live with me if your parents kick you out, which my parents would
Yeah.
never do. But you're so caught up in that, and that control and manipulation really makes you feel like that. And so, I just told them, I was like, I just can't keep doing this. I came out and told them, I was like, I've been living a double life this whole time, especially the last year and a half. I've been going places that I shouldn't have been going and hanging out with people I shouldn't have been hanging out with. And that's because I just needed that fresh air, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and so they were just, I mean, my mom was very like, okay, I get it. And which looking back now, she was struggling too, and I didn't realize it at the time. But my dad was like, well, I just want you to think about it. And I was like, I'm not going back. And I will never forget, he came in my room. I might cry because it broke my
Hmm.
heart, but he came in my room and was like, hey, let's go to church. And I just said, Dad, I'm not going. And he was like, no, just come on, just give it. And I said, Dad, I love you so much and I want to make you happy, but I'm not going. And he was so upset, and he wasn't upset with me. He just was like, they have you so controlled. Like, this is our family. And I mean, my dad is the kindest, gentlest man ever. And it just broke my heart to disappoint him to that level. And I know that he would be so upset to hear that, I felt like that. But, and I never was upset with him. Like, he had a right to feel what he did. This is your whole life. And now you've
Hmm.
got a kid saying, hey, sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. And she means it. And I'm the most stubborn child of all of my parents' children. And so he knew there was no convincing me otherwise. Um, and so that was really hard. That's what hurt,
Hmm.
was that separation from my family, that we're not going to church together anymore. By this time, Marissa was in campus. Um, so, she was home on weekends or whatnot. And then the twins were still there because they're younger than me, but and they weren't as involved. I don't remember them being as involved as me and Marissa, but it was hard. And not long after that, my mom has a degenerative back disc disease, and there was a lot of times she couldn't get out of bed in the mornings.
Hmm.
And so she missed Sunday service often, and not often, sometimes. It wasn't even often. And she got discipled because she was not at church because she physically couldn't get out of bed because she was in so much pain. And that was it for her. She just like flipped her shit on them, and good for her. I was so proud of her for standing up for herself.
But this was after you
That
left.
was about like maybe I thought it was a couple weeks, but I think it was a little bit longer, maybe a month or two after I left. So that helped, and then it didn't, because I had to like get reassurance from her that me leaving didn't have that same effect, like that didn't make her be like mad at people for how I'd been treated, because it wasn't necessarily all on them. Like, I can't put blame all on them, that's ridiculous. Um, but it was not a fun experience, especially at the end. And she was like, no, I've been feeling that way too. And she was like, my daughter, who was a teenager, had to be the strong one to make the move. So that was like a very bonding moment for us. So, that was refreshing. That,
And
but it was
it's
hard. I mean, those Sundays when they would leave, and Wednesdays and all that, and I'm not going. And, the twins, being the angels that they are, they continued to go with my dad for a long time. And then he went to the other big church that was in Alpharetta, the other North, whatever it's called. Um, And I went one time with him, and there were similarities, but there weren't. I was really blown away that the fact that the preacher's family was not sitting in the front row. They sat wherever they sat when they got in. They did not save seats. They did not rush to the front. They were like in the middle of the crowd because they had gotten there later. So I was like, that's cool. Like, is that normal? Like, I just didn't know. Like that this is all I really remembered. So but I was like, it's too soon. I don't want to be here. Like I wanted to go and just spend time with him and do that, but I was like, no thanks.
Yeah. Um, it's really cool that like your parents were there for you. It's also like a testament to the family,
Oh yeah,
and
they're
like
amazing.
it's always funny when like the things that they tell you are going to happen aren't going to happen,
Yeah.
you know?
It's like I was so scared for so long and lost sleep and everything. Like, what? It's
Yeah.
nonsense.
It was pretty funny because I was going to ask you like, did you still have to go to church after you left? And so
He didn't make
started.
me, which
Yeah.
I was really glad. And I think that also had to do with the fact that I was almost 18. I was
Yeah.
graduating.
Mhm.
I mean, this was in like February or March, and I turned 18 in
Mhm.
May. So it was, and they know who I am stubborn as a mule. I get that from my mama. Like once I've made up my mind about something, good luck changing my mind. Even if I know it's not good for me, like, because I'm ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, he knew, like, he could tell the hurt that in my voice that I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to keep
Mhm.
doing this. And I wasn't going to keep lying to them. And it wasn't fair for me to have to fake who I really am any longer. And I never should have. And they never made me feel like I had to by any means. That was all me.
Awesome. Mhm.
That's all me. But said no, I was worried that he would make me, especially when he came in my room that night and was like, hey, let's go to church. And I just was like, no. And he was like, come on, let's go. And I was like, I'm not going. Um, and that broke my heart. Oh my gosh, it broke my heart. And he didn't make me feel like heartbroken, but it was just my own, like, oh, okay, this is really happening. I'm really sticking with this.
Mhm.
And there was no going back for me at that point. I didn't want anything to do with it. The friends that were still in, even though they were told not to talk to me, they still did. Like I said, that we had already started making friends with people that weren't as in the cliques as ever,
Mhm. Yeah.
so that helped. I mean, I still have such great friends. Like I just went to Alexis's birthday, and saw everybody, and
Mhm.
that's always so fun because you instantly click or have just like, oh, we get each other's trauma bond, like we have that trauma bond. And so like those are some of my best friends because they get what we've been through or my way of thinking about stuff, maybe not normal to other people that didn't have that. Like my kids are like, oh, is this from the cult? Like they call it the cult. Like that's literally, and my husband will be like, oh yeah, she was raised in a cult. I'm like, shut up.
That's hilarious. It's
He's so intrigued by it.
yeah. I want to go back to the whole when not having to go to church after you quit.
Yeah.
It's like I had to, and it wasn't like this. My dad had this. He told me this. I remember I was telling him that like I didn't want to study the Bible or something, and he was like, "Well, you know, you're still a kid. When you turn 18, do whatever you want. Until you're
Right.
18, you got to come with us. It's just, that's my rule." And I was like,
Yeah.
"All right,
That
whatever." And
sucks.
it was
You were
it,
already uncomfortable before, but now add that in that you stopped
but when
studying.
I think about those, because it was only a few months, really,
Mhm.
because I quit. It was maybe about a year. I don't know, but it was kind of loosey goosey. But those were some of my favorite times because, like, I mean, it was, I had two friends there that were under the same boat as me.
Okay.
They had to go to church too, but they didn't want anything to do with it. And so we would always find each other and sit in the back.
Heck yeah. Oh, you
And
rebels sitting in the back. You always
yeah,
knew those were the
and yeah,
closed
and
off
then
part.
I always had them around. I remember one time because my senior year, I had already kind of quit and I
Mhm.
had to go up in front of everybody because it was like, these are the seniors that are graduating. And yeah, it was so uncomfortable and
Bless
awkward
your heart.
that I had to stand up there. And it was so funny because like there was another kid the other kid that I would sit with, he was next to
Mhm.
me too. And so we all were up there and it was so uncomfortable because like I hadn't. dressed like I was supposed to be on stage, so I looked like a dirtbag. And and then he was, they give off the list of all your accomplishments or whatever. And I remember the teen leader at the time, he told God, this is so funny. I was a girls' soccer manager my senior year, which,
Were you allowed to? Oh, wait, you were already done studying,
yeah,
right? Okay.
and I
So you
was
were allowed.
doing it only because it was like I could hang around a bunch of hot girls and then
Absolutely.
go on the bus. It was great. So like he's reading off the list, and like the guy, my friend before me, he was like he lettered in basketball. It was great. And then he gets to me and is like, Roy, he lettered in marching band. That's great. And he was also girls soccer manager. And then he pauses and looks back at me in front of everyone.
Why?
And then he looks at me, and then he turns back and he goes, smart kid. And then just continues on. And my parents were just like, oh my God. And I just was like, I just lifted my hands up like,
That's
oh.
hilarious, though. I love that.
Yeah, but it was
I mean, you
just,
were. That's smart.
yeah, it was so funny. But I mean, it was like it was kind of like it was the freest I felt at church because I had these two
Yeah.
guys. We were friends. We would hang out, we would talk. When we have
I'm so glad you
Congos,
had that.
yeah,
That's
when we would go to Congo services, we would like wander around and find the cool like vending
mhm.
machines down in the bowels of
They had the best.
yeah. But anyway, um, but yeah, so like where'd you land, like where are you now with all this stuff? Like
Um,
with God, I mean, I can tell with church
well,
it's
I went to church and they shut
definitely
down, so that's been my experience there.
Mhm.
Um, I I still really struggle there. I still have so much anger that I haven't worked through, and I just started therapy 2 weeks ago. And I know she's going to be listening to this because I told her that we were going to be discussing this. And
Mhm.
I still have a lot of anger. Like I hate when people tell me they're praying for me, and I've
Yeah. Yeah.
recently it's been better. Like I don't find comfort in the, oh, like give it to God. So my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years ago.
Damn.
And so, yeah, she's cancer free. Thank God. She's amazing.
Good.
She's doing so well. I'm so excited for her. Um, but they had all four of us girls that we needed to get early mammograms before we were 40. So, and I'm still not 40 yet. So, last year I went and my life has been really just chaotic the last couple of years. Um, and so just like this on top of it, like I lost my best friend, he died. And like didn't just die, I had to make the decision to turn the machines off. I was his power of attorney.
Jeez.
So I was dealing with that and then a nasty custody battle. And thankfully we've got the kids and it's just draining. It's exhausting and it makes you question everything. And the last thing that would bring me comfort is somebody telling me I'm praying for you. And so like I was very bitter at this. And I went in and they found something on my mammogram. And
Mhm.
so I had to go back. And that same day that they called me about it, we got a call that my dad was going to have to be taken by ambulance to the hospital from his heart cath that he was getting because he had blockage.
Mhm.
And man, 69 years old, never had surgery, and he ended up having to get a quadruple bypass last summer.
Whoa.
So all of that, like I got the call from the doctor's office, and then so I go in for my second one, and the lady, and I live in the middle of nowhere. I live in a little town, um, so everybody is like, and we're right here in the Bible thumper area. But I get to, and she could tell I was anxious because obviously my mom has had breast cancer, and I'm getting mammograms for a reason, and they've found something. So that was scary for me. And I wouldn't let my sister come. My sister was in town for my dad's procedure and stuff. And my mom was like, we're coming. And I was like, no, y'all stay there, deal with that. And then they were like, all my sisters were texting me threats. Like, if you don't give her the address to come where you are, we're gonna hunt you down, whatever. And I was like, I appreciate it, but I didn't get to grieve when my best friend died because I felt like I had to take care of his family and all the friends and my kids. And like I never grieved him, and we're coming up on 3 years next week. And so I was like, if something is found truly, I need to grieve on my own. So I'm like already on edge, and I get there And this lady can see that I'm just not okay. And she was like, "Oh, this is a second mammogram." And she was like, "You're young though." And I was like, "Well, my mom had breast cancer a couple of years ago."
Hmm.
And she grabs my hand and I was like, "Ew," first of
Yeah.
all. So I was already like, "Don't touch me. I don't know you." Um, but then she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna pray for you, just think about God and his glory." And I just started sobbing. Like everybody in that waiting room was looking at me because where you go for the mammogram, it's for like all the x-rays and stuff. So it's not just women in there. It is men, women, kids, like, and it was a full room. And I just start crying and I said, "I don't believe in the God that you believe in, and that does not bring me comfort. That actually makes the situation worse." And she just like immediately like slid back, was like, "I'm so sorry." And I was just,
God,
and
you
that's
you
the
were
first time
able
I've
to
ever
say
told
that?
somebody that. That's the first time I've ever like, and
Wow.
it felt so
Good on
empowering. Like I
you.
could be like, "No, like this is not bringing me comfort by you telling me." I mean, I just like that made me lose it. And I was like, "That's not comforting to me. That actually gives me bad vibes going into this." And then that was a
Yeah.
whole nightmare because they're like, "Oh, we see something." Somebody else comes in. "Oh, yeah, I see that too. Let me bring the doctor." All for it to be nothing. All for it to be nothing. Yeah, so they stressed me out for nothing. And that lady had to hear about that reason. And then I found my current doctor and her nurse, give it all to God every time. And I just was like, so she was talking to me about something when we were talking about my depression. And she was like, "This is when we give it to God." I said, "No, we don't." She was like stopped and looked at me. I go, "I'm sorry. I just don't know how to be nice about it." Like that
I
does
have
not
it.
comfort me. Like I just literally was like, "No, it doesn't." And I said, "I'm sorry. I know that that's what you believe, but I absolutely do not. And that does not bring me comfort." And she has not said it to me since. And I wasn't
Yeah.
ugly about it, but I was just like, "No, like shut up."
I don't tell people I'm praying for them.
I'll say I'm thinking about you or sending good
Yeah.
vibes or good
I also
thoughts or, but
I
no, I
learned
won't get
because the last 2 years I taught at a Quaker school,
hmm
and Quakers are really it's a rad branch of Christianity.
That's awesome.
Um, but they say we hold you in the light.
Oh, that's fun.
So and that is what I tend to say because they don't say we're not going to pray for the even the emails that like at the school like the principal would
hmm
send out, it's like we're going to hold this family in the light. We don't say we're going to
That's
pray
cool.
for them. So yeah, because it's, man, it's problematic.
It is. It's just like I'm like, "Don't pray for me. Like I don't want you to pray for me." And I'm slowly now, after
Mhm.
getting all that out, I think it just took me telling people to pretty much just fuck off. It's helped, but like I have a friend and she's very much into church and her spirituality to the point where I I don't read half the post because I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But and she's wonderful. And she is what I would see as an example of a true Christian. And I love that about her. And she'll tell me that she's praying for me. And it used to really bother me until recently. I was just not okay at all. And she did not just pray for me. She showed up at my house with bread that she made homemade, which is not easy to do.
Mhm.
It was offering to come wash our clothes if I needed to help with that. Stuff like that. Like she showed up. So that I was okay with her telling me because I knew it was from a genuine place. But people that I don't know, I'm like, "Ew, don't tell me that. Like, don't pray for me. Just send me good vibes. I'll take the good vibes." But
Right. I see all the
but
time. I see all the time people walking up to people and saying like, "Just want to let you know God loves you," and you're just
ugh, I
like,
literally go, "Ew." I've had somebody do that to me. I go, "Ew." Like, no.
yeah. Oh my
I'm like,
God.
"No." I have to tell you this. There was so when I first met my husband's family, it was the very first time I met his whole family. It was at his aunt's surprise party.
Mhm.
And they go to a church and one of our ex-members goes. And
Oh,
I know you will know him, but he not he had done fallen off or whatever and done some drugs and has not been the same since. So he's like out there. And
mhm.
he starts, and I had already told like Mason, like I'm not like I just could feel the panic because he is still very much like religious or talks religious anyways. He's not, but he speaks it. And I was like, "I'm gonna get cornered by this guy. You have to save me." So literally I'm standing in their doorway and my husband, who's then my like our second, third date, they're all sitting right there at the kitchen counter and they hear him start talking to me and they're all laughing because he's just odd.
Yeah.
Anyways, and he starts talking or whatever, and he's like preaching or whatever, and he was like pretty much shaming me for falling away. And I was like, dude, you don't even go to the same church. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Mind you, I've left when I was 17, and at this time I was like 32. Um,
Mhm.
so he starts talking to me. He was like, your relationship with God, it's like a marriage, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, I've been divorced once and I'd do it again if I needed to. I was like, I'm okay with that. And he just
Yeah.
was like, what? And I was like, the divorce is the best thing I ever did. What are you doing with my
Mhm.
ex-husband and God? So like, and he just was like, and I said, I don't believe that. Stop talking to me like that. I'm not a child, and you're not gonna sit here and preach to me. And like Mason could see me like visibly like just getting pissed. And I'm like, this is the first time I met his family, and I'm about to be cussing this man out. But so they swept it. I literally was texting him and I said, save me. And so him and all his cousins were saints and they came in and saved me. But yeah, it
Wow.
was, and they still laugh about it. And then he showed up at their grandfather's funeral and I was like trying to dodge him like the plague. I was talking to my mother-in-law and he comes up from behind me and grabs my shoulders and I was like, he found
Oh,
me.
yeah. Because it's so natural and so right to do whatever it is that he's doing. Like
Yeah.
in that culture
Yeah.
and system that we were, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And, and it's
It
like
is. And it's
cringy.
so funny because it is. But when you're already thinking about leaving that or falling away, I will never forget. Do you remember? I think they did it like one time. It was a campus retreat, but the high schoolers got to go and it was in like Tybee Island or
Myrtle Beach.
somewhere. It was, yeah, it was to the beach. But I was already struggling at that point. And, I had a fun trip out there. I rode with my sister and her best friend and, just listening to music, jamming out. It was great right out there. But, you have all these meetings with this whole event. I think it was like a 2-day trip or something. I don't know. But I remember there was a guy that was out in the East that I had become really good friends with. And I was like, well, I feel like he could help me through this. We were really good friends. We talked about everything. And I'll never forget, I was talking to him and I said, well, to be honest, I'm just really struggling. Like, I don't have the heart in it. I don't wake up and like, thank God for everything. And, this is the last place I want to be. And instead of being there for me, he's like, how dare you? How selfish of you. And I was like, this guy was my friend. Like, and I was just like, and I just looked at him and I was like, okay, because I couldn't stand up for myself because I didn't know how. I'd never been allowed to. And so he's sitting here like rebuking me in this whole event. And I'm just like, it made me feel even worse, made me feel like I was just the absolute worst person. And I was already struggling with this decision, not because of these people, but because of my family.
Mhm.
And I was just like, that just made it easier. So that coupled with what happened at that Sunday service and like the constant, let's get sharp people, share your faith, but you really want the sharp people here and, not being able to have a conversation with anybody outside the church without being accused of being inappropriate. So it was just like, that doesn't help at all. That doesn't bring me comfort, but they thought it did. They thought,
Mhm.
hey, this is comfort. This is going to keep you here. You just need tough love. And that was not tough love. It was, screw you. I'm not coming back. Like, I don't want you in my life. Like, no. And haven't spoken to the guy since.
Yeah,
And
it's a Christian thing to
mm-hmm.
to break you. Not
Yeah,
even for us, because I mean
it was in multiple places.
I've been in hundreds, probably 100 churches since I've left the church because of one of my other
You're better than
jobs.
me.
But no, it was because of a job. It had nothing to
Okay.
do with
Oh, was that
it's
the coffee job?
yeah, the coffee job.
Okay.
And so like you would I would overhear and see conversations like that constantly because it's like people need to be cut. It's like you got to cut someone to the heart. You're
Mm-hmm.
loving them by making them feel like shit. So,
Yeah. And that's their justification. And it's like, but that's the God that goes back to the God
mhm,
that they are portrayed to. Like,
yeah.
this is how your God is. And, you're not doing right. So he's going to hurt, he flooded the earth before, and he sent all these things to happen. And, that's what we're going to do to you. We're going to cut you down and break you off at your knees. And then we're going to build you back up because that's what God does.
Mhm.
And it's just like, I, and I'm supposed to be worshiping this, like,
So
and that's why
stupid.
I have
It's not
zero.
at
It
all
is.
what
It's
happened.
so funny though, because I'm like the justification that we all had in that, growing up. But you know, people now, I just organized religion stresses me out,
Mhm.
and I love that people have their beliefs and all that, but don't come at me with them. Like, you can talk to me
Yeah.
about them and that's fine, but as soon as you become like, hey, you're wrong for this or whatever, or you use your religion to be a shitbag person, I want nothing. I lose all respect for you. I want nothing to do with you. That's why this time of year is really difficult for me with elections and stuff, because I think
Mhm.
both sides are just trash, and the people that support those sides are trash with how they treat each other. And so I'm just like, can't we just all get along?
Yeah.
But I do. I'm like, don't hide behind your religion to make you a shitty person, because that's not okay. Because you're gonna have to pay for that one day, and I'm not, because I'm not listening to it.
And it sounds like, you've gone from someone who's trying to please everybody
To
to
not
like
at all.
as soon as people do that, you're like, hey, step the fuck back, man.
Yep,
So
absolutely. It's so
that's
crazy, and
pretty
that's only
cool.
recent years,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
I still like, Mason laughs at me all the time. He's like, you just don't, like, I don't like confrontation. And so like, if my food is wrong, I won't send it back. And he's like, can you just, and he's like, no, this is wrong, you're sending it back. And I'm like, no, I don't want to inconvenience, like, it happens. I'm still very understanding. I don't have tolerance when it comes to, like, I can smell somebody being fake from a mile away, and that's also
Mhm.
from trauma of an ex relationship, and dealing with a co-parent that was very narcissistic, and so that kind of like fueled my fuck you. But for a long time I still was like, oh, that's nice, thanks, I want to be polite. And now I'm just, and Marissa's always like, that was my favorite thing about you, is that you're so nice to people. I'm like, I still am, until they cross that line, and they're going to learn that that's my boundary really quick, because I'm like, no, no, we're not doing that here. We're not going to talk like that. Like, I'm very protective of my children. If people try and
Mhm.
speak like that to them, I'm like, no, they don't get to use their religion as a reason for their shitty behavior. That's not okay. You can have your religion and you can be a good person and not treat people like that. And so
Yeah.
I have zero, I have no patience for that type of
And
person, like, at all.
you
Like, I
shouldn't.
immediately am like, ew. And I will say it to your face. I'll be like, ew, what? Gross.
It's awesome.
It's terrible. It's really bad. Like, I got to rein it in. I got to learn how to rein it in,
Well, no,
because
I
it's
mean,
out of control
I
right
get
now.
that part, but no, yeah, you shouldn't have patience for people like that sometimes. So, the big question: we were in a cult.
100%. Absolutely. My children know we were in a cult. So, yes. But I am grateful for those friendships.
Mhm.
I can't say it was all bad,
Yeah.
but yeah, just left with a lot of trauma, but it wasn't all bad. I got to
Mhm.
talk to you again. That was so fun. I'm so happy about that. And,
Yeah, it was. It was a
hearing old
blast.
friends' voices is nice. And
Uh-huh.
so, and you always have somebody to relate to you. So, yay, we'll be trauma
It's,
bond forever.
yeah. Oh, that's great. We should make t-shirts. No, I'm not going to make t-shirts for that.
I will buy one. I'll
No.
support it. It'll go towards your book. Look, it'll fund your book. Do it.
Oh man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for
Thank you for
having me.
sharing the story. It was it's I'm proud of you for sharing the story. I'm grateful for you for sharing the story. It helps me, it helps other people. So,
And likewise, what you're doing
yeah.
is amazing. And I appreciate you for doing
Yeah.
this, because
Appreciate that.
it's not easy. People don't realize how difficult this is. So
Mm.
I know I laugh, but that's just my trauma response. That's how I deal
Yeah.
with stuff. But
No, I get that.
yeah, I'm one of those that laughs in uncomfortable situations. But I mean, I am who I am today because of it.
Mhm.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. Um, I learned to be a lot stronger because I had to stand up for myself, which was never easy. And some
Yeah.
of my dearest friends are from there. So, and I never would have known them. But
Yeah.
other than that, it's all garbage. It's absolutely a cult. But we
Right on.
survived it and we got
We
out.
did.
So
We did. So yeah, well, thank you. And
thank
thank you
you.
guys for listening and supporting the podcast. And if you were a part of the International Church of Christ and want to come on and share your story, please reach out at Clemens with a Z at gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram with the Clemens with a Z podcast Instagram page. Take care, guys. Until next time. Peace.